Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend R. Christian Boland from Florida. He is an Amazon best-selling author, award-winning consultant for Fortune 500 companies. He has 2 books we're going to talk about. But first, my housekeeping, please stop what you're doing, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. I have now 13 books of historical dream literature available on Amazon. Links in the description below. Get a t-shirt, coffee mug, all that good stuff. I do need your support if you like what I do. That's enough housekeeping out of me. I appreciate your support. Back to our friend Christian. Your website, hislifeandmine.com, is based on your first book, Jesus Christ, His Life and Mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Benjamin. Thanks for having me.
Right, I just jumped straight into the business. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your time.
I'm really excited to be here. I'm really intrigued and been in suspense since we planned this and scheduled this. What you do is such a neat concept. And, the human organism certainly is complex, right? There's just so much going on, and the whole spiritual dimension and so forth. And I should share that because there are different perceptions of religion and faith and Christianity, that I'm not at all judgmental. As a matter of fact, the way I often describe myself in bios is that what I write about blends faith and psychology in loving and non-judgmental ways. I'm super respectful for folks of different perspectives and who may be skeptical about faith or, just kind of on that faith journey. And so I just want everybody to know that that's my context, my perspective for everything in my life, and certainly what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I was mentioning, before we started recording, that is a wonderful way of expressing what I do as well. Everyone has their own faith, and we all have the scientific rules of psychology by which the human mind and body and work to understand the world and perceptions and different stuff. But when it comes to dreams, it is very much a blending of what do you believe, what's your worldview, and how are you experiencing that in your unconscious mind while you're disconnected from external input. And for folks out there who look at, what does this guy believe? Doesn't matter what I believe. Getting to the correct dream interpretation for an individual entirely depends on what they believe. If they believe in space aliens, that's their frame of reference in the dream for that specific imagery. If they're specifically Christian, they're going to be looking at these, they're going to be showing themselves symbols that make sense from within their own perspective. So it doesn't matter what I believe. It's entirely up to what the dreamer believes. So it's definitely that faith and psychology meeting.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Thank you. It's nice to hear that someone else phrased it so well, that loving, non-judgmental connection of the two. Yeah. But you had another book as well. So you've got Jesus Christ, His Life and Mine, and then you've also got Healing the Stormy Marriage.
Right. Yeah, this deals with what's an exploding phenomenon in our society, in our modern stressful societies, and that's mental health and how that affects marriages. And so there's a lot of books out there to help folks who are mentally ill or addicted or struggling with some kind of mental health situation. Not so many about the spouse who's trying to get through that, support their spouse, trying to decide whether I can handle this or not. So our book is specifically designed to support the spouse with fewer issues, because hardly anybody has no issues, right?
Yeah.
And certainly in our
case, a good way to put it.
My wife and I both have diagnosed mental conditions for which we take medication, and we believe that medications can be helpful when we do believe put God first. But some folks take a very hardline approach and don't even believe in psychiatry. That certainly isn't our situation. Yeah. But we've been through a lot. Our story is harrowing, gut-wrenching. It's 36 years, and a lot of it's described. And that second book is not just a memoir. It is a self-help book. It's designed to provide, tips, advice, recommendations also from world-renowned researchers. And then it's faith-based as well. So big topic. A lot of marriages are collapsing after the pandemic, especially mental health. We see it exploding everywhere. I suppose it would affect our dreams, right, Benjamin? When things aren't quite right up there, then wow, somehow it comes out in that subconscious, right?
It definitely can, yeah. And that reminded me of, I don't know if you're familiar with another author approaching the similar the same subject from a similar perspective. It's a man by the name of Javier Amador, and he wrote a book called "I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help." And that's a quote from his schizophrenic brother as his brother slammed the kitchen door and stormed off to disappear for months. And it was all about his experience trying to be of benefit to his mentally ill brother in some hard times. And he's a clinical psychologist. So he's like,
wow,
you think he'd know what he was doing. And he's like, I was lost. I was frustrated. There's been a big shift in understanding a lot of delusional disorder conditions with that type of presentation where we just don't see reality the same as the other person. The old school was confront until you break down, and then they finally capitulate and accept, I'm sick, I need help. His perspective was like really just helping the support system around this person know they're not doing it on purpose. They're not being obstinate. It's not like they know the truth and they're just being dumb on purpose and obstinate about it. They hear things you don't hear. They see things you don't see. They feel things you don't feel in the exact same circumstances.
Right.
Cut yourself some slack in that you're not fighting an enemy that is a person. You're trying to work with the person against the thing that's hurting them. Well, that's my ramble on that one. But it sounds like your experience is very similar with this book. How do you help your spouse, the person you love the most, get through this experience?
Yeah, for sure. And how do you take care of yourself and protect yourself in the process? But I really love what you just described, because that is exactly the perspective that we take in the book. Exactly what you just said.
Which part of it? I said I ramble a lot. Sorry.
Well, the fact that the other person experiences a lot of things that we can't understand, we can't see. We're not trying to confront them and beat them into submission. So this idea that you've got to find a way to manage to love the other person through that circumstance, while still, pointing them and encouraging them to get help. But in some cases, they're just going to be resistant, and the person has to just decide. Well, first of all, they have to decide whether they're going to commit to the relationship or not. If it's not too abusive, we do not take the perspective that you should just submit to whatever is being dished out, because we have a whole chapter on forms of abuse, and there's times to separate. I mean, we were separated 4 times, filed for divorce twice. I actually bought my wife a house at the 15th year. Like, that was it. I mean, I was done. Yeah. And due to some very miraculous changes and circumstances in her life, we got back together. But still, 4 separations, physical separations up to that point, those are necessary. I needed it to protect myself. We needed to establish some boundaries. So there's a lot to it. And, we believe that you put God first. You decide, with his help, is this something that I can sustain? Because he sees things that we can't see. He sees the beginning from the end. I like to trust in that. And it has actually panned out really well. Now, sometimes when we go a path that we think is the right path, we think, oh, that means everything should just be easy. No. That wasn't the case. I mean, I described how at year 27, I was at a near collapse. And then at that point, she entered a psychiatric program that made a huge difference, that taught her dialectical behavior therapy, which is the most effective for severe personality disorders like borderline. We're dealing with bipolar. I'm bipolar. She's bipolar, borderline personality. We had our hands full. PTSD was added to my plate just from dealing with her. Yeah. So you can imagine the crazy dreams that I had. And I even write about one of them in that book about marriage that was so significant.
Yeah, and that was the one you wanted to share, and it sounds like you have your own understanding of it, but I don't. I haven't read the book. I haven't heard the dream this first time. I like to just take things as they come, roll with intuition and abstract connections. So if you feel like we've discussed your life and circumstances, to give people a picture of who you are and what you have available as resources for folks, I'm ready to do the dream.
Yeah, I'd say we jump in, sure.
Good deal. So as per my usual process, I'm just going to shut up and listen, take notes. You tell me what the experience was beginning to end, and then we'll see what we can make of it.
Okay.
All right.
So I actually went to therapy off and on throughout our marriage. I needed support. I needed somebody to talk to,
Mm-hmm.
to deal with what was going on. I needed advice, and I had this just wonderful gentleman, was a PhD clinical psychologist, and at one point I recall that, and I told him this, that I had this recurring dream. So recurring, I think, is really significant. I don't know if I had it 5 or 10 times, but it kept coming back. And it was that I was driving in a car and I was reaching for the brake, and it was always just a little out of reach. And I would stretch and I would try to tap on the brake, and I could not reach it. And I mean, that's the long and short of it, Benjamin. It's not a long dream. Now today, and by the way, I can tell you what happened like within a year or so of having this conversation. I don't have that dream anymore, which is interesting.
Yeah, that has been my experience, that if you can solve the puzzle, so to speak, of a specific reoccurring dream, it will stop. This is what reinforces my belief that dreams are not only, as I say, the heart beats, the lungs breathe, and the brain thinks, and it does that awake or asleep. So we've got a brain constantly, the wheels are spinning, we're just disconnected from external stimuli. So what is our brain thinking about when we're asleep? Right. It's thinking about everything we've ever experienced or could possibly imagine, but balancing that by what's most important to me right now, what am I thinking about lately, and ongoing unresolved specific types of problems. And those get very typically frozen into iconic representations that then that's the recurring dream. You've got to, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind. So, okay, typically my process is we get a dream narrative. Someone says, I was here and I did this, and then I went over there and I did that, and these other people were there, and then the whole scene changed and I was in outer space, this kind of stuff. Right. But lately I've been running into a slew of folks who have specifically recurring dreams, and they've kind of crystallized it to a set of events. So what I typically do is try to pick the most recent experience of a dream like that and get those deeper dive details. That lately in my, the last so many episodes has not been consistent. I'm getting, so if we're going to say, I've requested God to improve my skills, I'm getting some curveballs. If we frame it in that way, which is good because it gives us an opportunity to talk more about. Well, it expands my abilities. I hope pushes the limits, but it also lets us discuss the broader phenomenon itself and kind of how it presents. All of this with you saying, so I had the dream and then I talked about it and it went away, and that is absolutely typical.
I can't say for sure that it went away after talking about it,
mm-hmm.
but we did quite quickly come to, now remember my context was dealing with this mentally ill spouse who at that point was still having major problems.
Yeah.
And I was under a lot of stress. I would wake up screaming frequently, like you hear about, Vietnam vets and stuff like that, frequently throughout our marriage. Still I do. But it was worse back then. So there was a lot of stress going on, and we landed on an interpretation that I think led to a significant shift of my perspective and emphasis and focus. And then I suppose the dream went away.
Yeah. Well, if that's fair enough. Yes. So what I was hoping you weren't going to give me the answer yet, because I do want to take a stab at it in terms of. So and this is why I talk to people. So we've had a little description of who you are and what you do, not a whole patient history, just enough interaction to get a feel. What do you think? What do you believe? Where are you coming from on stuff? So in that context, what I would typically do is narrow it down to, when did these dreams start? When did they stop? That context of, it stopped after I came to a certain understanding of it and maybe was able to implement that. That's what I've been able to do for a couple of folks, and that's a very satisfying experience for me. I hear back from them. The dream stopped. We figured it out. That was it. And I did, and I changed. Something? It is. Wow. It really, if anyone says, dreams are meaningless, it's like,
No.
if
Oh,
you can
no,
make
no.
something of it, it's maybe useful. I mean, the proof's in
Yeah,
the pudding. They say, you know, you
yeah,
if the recurrent dream stops, we did something. Something happened. Some switch
yeah.
flipped. Maybe you just need to get it out. Some people, there's a magic in just putting your words, you know, thoughts into words or putting them on paper, getting it out of your head, so you can just step back and look at it and go, that's not me. That's a thought I had. That's an experience I went through 10 years ago.
Right, right.
And it's not in here anymore. It's out here where I can look at it. That's my metaphorical understanding of magic encompasses that kind
Yeah,
of magic words. Um,
yeah,
okay, so back to your dream specifically. The first thoughts that I had were, you know, you're driving in a car and you want to stop and you're
yeah.
reaching for the brake, which is the stopping mechanism. That's where I get you want to stop. I mean, you didn't say you want to stop, but what do you reach for the brake for? But the brake is out of reach. The ability to put a stop to your motion is
Right,
out of reach, and you're
right.
struggling to get there, stretching, and it's just maybe
Yeah,
even I saw it in my head. You're able to get your toe on the lip of it, but
that's
you
right.
can't put any
That's
pressure on it. It slips off.
that's that's right.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention that there's a real feeling of concern and anxiety. Like I need to be stopping. Like this is not good. Why can I not stop?
Yeah. And so we've got that broad idea of what is the experience you're having. Anxiety fits with it. It would be very interesting if you were blasé about it. If you're like, well,
Right,
whatever. I mean, that would be a different kind of out of control. This one
right.
is a very threatening out of control.
Yeah,
The next questions I would go to are hopefully the deep dive description I typically get into with folks. I start asking about, well, what is the circumstances of your life that are out of control that would lead to this imagery popping up to focus your attention on what you think the problem is. And it could be you are personally out of control. You're doing behaviors that you wish you could stop, but you don't know how. Or you're dealing with someone else who your efforts to effectively put a stop to their behavior or some circumstance affecting them is beyond your ability currently. That's where a conversation typically takes
yeah,
us. Narrow it down to, okay, well, what does this sense of out of control mean? And
yes, yes,
that's where it's tough with some of these dreams in terms of if you've already talked to someone else and you've already come to an understanding and it's already had the beneficial effect in your life, I can't
right,
pull that out of you. We can't have a discovery process together.
right.
So sometimes I just got to throw it
Well,
back to the people and say, well, was I onto something with that description in general?
well, I think are we recording again yet?
Yeah, I left it running and we're
Okay.
back. Yeah.
All right. So, by the way, this might be useful, Benjamin, that I've had now new dreams that has
Okay.
some resemblance to that, but not quite the same. So there's something back that I would like to talk about.
Sure.
But this one here, I think the out of control, that was like the obvious thing that came to me. It resonated with me as well. I think it's a great point of maybe there was something out of control in my life, but the bigger issue was clearly I I mean this might sound shocking to some people that you would be willing to stay in a relationship with somebody who really is that out of control. But if you don't read my book or other people's stories of dealing with mental health issues, a person couldn't possibly imagine just how confusing and nuanced. It's very nuanced. It's hard to
Mm.
describe the full range of chaos that a person experiences in those situations and how much is coming at you. But the overriding sense is one of powerlessness. It's like, I can't stop this.
Yeah.
And so it's just this literal metaphor of I can't stop the craziness that's happening in my life. And it hurts me, it bothers me. And the recommendation in psychology terms, it's so critical. It's the number one most important thing to do it with addicts when you're married or you love somebody that's an addict or a mental health situation is to establish boundaries. You've got to
Yeah.
protect what's important to you. And while I knew about that to some degree, I hadn't studied it or given it enough focus. And so this therapist helped me work through that. And sure enough, And it was, well, I had been doing boundaries to some degree. When you do a separation, you're basically saying this is unacceptable to me.
Literal
And
physical boundary. Yeah.
Yeah. But then once things, go beyond the really crazy stages of life and they just get a little more subtle, you still have to enforce some kinds of boundaries. And, because you don't want to be separating all the time. There has to be ways. But, we found some ways and, how you spend your time, do you have a little more free time than you used to? Can you enforce, like in a conversation where if it gets out of control, can you safely walk away and say, I'm not okay with this, without the other person following you around and beating on the wall, which is what my wife used to do, which was maddening. So, but if you'd like, we could transition to what I'm recently experiencing.
Yeah, if you've got a more recent dream that might need a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, I would appreciate that.
What do you got?
It's similar. So this is, again, a recurring dream. And I tend to kick and punch. More kicking, thank goodness. Punching would be really bad. But in these dreams, there's some type of a violent episode about to happen or in flight, and somebody's like, brandishing a deadly weapon, or there's something going on. I think the most recent one was honestly just this week, and I kicked my wife hard, and then she'll wake up and say, Rob, stop it. Stop it. She calls me Rob. Yeah. Stop kicking me. And then I'll wake up and say, I'm so sorry. He was a young fellow. He had a gun. I distinctly saw it in his hand, and I was close enough that I felt I could kick it out of his hand. And so in this dream, I never quite make contact with the deadly object, or I'm able to, knock the person away or something. So I keep kicking harder.
Yeah.
And it's really dangerous. I'm hurting my wife. I mean, in my subconscious, sure. I'm putting everything into it because I keep thinking to myself, why can't I do this? Come on, harder. So I'm literally putting everything into it. And a couple times I have punched her. Once, I think, in the head. But usually it's a kick. My leg may go way up and then I'll kick down, but sometimes sideways. And it's to ward off something. Mm-hmm. But Benjamin, the fact that this keeps happening is, now it's maybe only every 3 months, something like that. But I don't know. That's still, you enjoy working with something unresolved. I don't know what the heck's going on.
Yeah, now just in general is we would call this, or old school, they called it somnambulism. Now we're sleepwalking, sleep talking. There's something going on with that liminal space between I'm unconscious and my motor functions are shut off, and I'm unconscious, but my motor functions are acting out my dreams. It's been going on for ages. I mean, this goes back, hundreds, if not thousands of years. This does happen. Biologically, it's possible to have both happening. People that have, like a cat burglar, scaled buildings and ran across rooftops and have no memory of it, and could never imagine themselves having done so, or nor their friends in their waking life. Like, that's ridiculous. That's dangerous.
Wow.
That's stupid. I have no purpose for doing that. But they were acting out a dream. Whole conversations with people. These things happen. It also brings to mind one of my favorite recent comedians, a guy by the name of Mike Birbiglia, and he has that somnambulist action going on. He tells a famous story of where he climbed up on a dresser because he thought there was like a wasp jackal insectoid creature in the room, and he's balancing on this little 5 foot tall dresser on the edge of his room because he's going to get ready to attack it. Another great story of his: jumped through the window of a La Quinta Inn thinking he's the Hulk and there's a missile coming, and for the life of the platoon he's got to get away from the base, and through a window from the second story, rolled in the grass, bleeding in his underwear. He's had some experiences. Yeah, he tells the story much better than I do. That's the long story short.
That's amazing.
That is really, I can't imagine doing that. I've done one thing where I was kind of partly awake, and a girlfriend I was dating way back, I had my hand on my face and she went to touch me and I flinched and flicked her in the nose. It wasn't like I'm going to get her. It's like I was aware someone was in the room, but I was comfy, and then I was startled by the touch. It was a gentle touch. Good morning. Pop in the face. Oh, I hated myself. Like I didn't do it. I didn't do it on purpose. Anyway, that's my story and other stories. So, but we're back to yours. So, is that somnambulism new for you? Has this never been a problem before, or have you always kind of walked and talked in your sleep occasionally?
Oh no, I don't walk. I never walked. Talking, yes, I have talked in my sleep all my life, I think.
So you've been on the edge, and there's different theories on whether it's all kind of the same thing, expresses itself in different ways, or whether there's categories of those who talk in their sleep tend to only talk, those who walk only tend to walk, or you get them both, but they come from different places. We're not really sure. I need to do more research into the functional MRI stuff, because that's fascinating to see different areas of the brain light up during sleep and what happens when we're dreaming. That's fascinating. So long story short on the Mike Birbiglia thing, I think he sleeps in mittens and a zipped up sleeping bag so that he can't get out of it until he's awake enough to take off the mittens and open the bag himself in his.
Incredible.
And that keeps him from, attacking his wife, which he's acted out some violent scenes in his dream before, put himself at risk. I don't want to say your case is that bad, but if you have medical advice available, maybe talk to him about it and say, I'm starting to act out my dreams, like kick and punch, and I don't want to do that. What do we do about that? There's medications, there's other interventions. So brief advice on that. But another way is to talk to the Dream Wizard and see if we can solve what it is that's making you feel threatened, which appears to be. So the most recent you can remember from maybe the last week was a young man with a gun in his hand, and you were close enough you thought you could take effective action to kick it out of his hand, and so you were trying to do that, but acting it out in that liminal, the borderland state, as Mary Arnold Forster would call it. What was the setting? Are you in an alley? Are you in a forest? Is this person invaded your home? Where did the action take place?
Oh man, I'm afraid I don't remember the context.
Fair enough.
I don't.
Any details of the person? It was definitely male and not female, so there's something going on there maybe.
It was a male, and I would venture that when this happens, it's probably always a male. And there's some threatening behavior. I have some reason to believe. Oftentimes I think I have this sensation that I'm having like a normal run-of-the-mill whatever dream, and then all of a sudden it takes this kind of evil slant where it just turns ugly. Now that happens quite a bit, and I think when it becomes like really dangerous and life-threatening ugly is where I start kicking and thrashing. But I think this is what happened this past week, is that it just came out of the blue. So that's why I don't have like a long storyline leading up to this character, nothing like that. Just all of a sudden it just turned ugly. Sure.
The reason, excuse me, the reason I start asking for those kind of details, where did it take place? What did the person look like? Is very often the setting or some certain attributes your mind put you in and put onto that representation will sometimes give a clue as to what is the actual nature of this problem you think might be a threat. Why is this threat appearing in this form, in this context? So it's hard without sufficient detail. Sometimes dreams are really that short. Bam, I'm confronted by a man with a gun and I try and kick it. And it happens in the blink of an eye, and suddenly you're awakened by your partner saying, you're kicking me. Whoa. And that literally just split second, it all happened all at once. And there might not have been a lot of time to analyze or to recall those kind of hard details, specific details. It is an interesting phenomenon that you're having this recent experience of, it feels like a normal dream. I'm fine. I'm just, seeing whatever. And then it turns threatening, dark, ugly, becomes a nightmare, there might be something in there in terms of your mind actually wanting to demonstrate the process of an experience from real life. What do I mean by that? You may have a recurrent mental state where if you allow yourself to just relax and feel like everything is okay, almost immediately, just being in that space, something wants to say, wait, but it could all go horribly wrong all of a sudden. Don't forget that. Don't forget everything could fall apart instantly. So, my thought would be, if that makes sense to you, there might have been something recently going on in your life where that reminded you of that possibility, where things seemed to be going well and an old problem came back that you thought you'd solved fairly well, but it isn't solved. I don't know if that resonates.
Well, it resonates 100% because that is the nature of my life. That's the nature of living with somebody who still isn't completely in the box. I love my wife. I mean, I had this amazing experience when we met that within 3 days, I was playing in a band, and our very first night on the road with a brand new band, full-time band. I always wanted to do this. Playing, back then hotels had bands 6 nights a week, and we got an agent that booked us into this band in South Jersey. And she walked in, and we hit it off immediately. But it was within the 3rd day that I had this distinct impression that I knew this person. I recognized her. I mean, it was powerful, and I instantly fell in love with her. I was like, this is, this person that I've been looking for. I mean, it's just wild. And my wife had a dream that's even wilder about knowing me before we were born. That even has physical evidence that was true. I can share that just as an amazing, cool dream. But why did I begin sharing that? Oh, because I love my wife, and I'm not the kind of guy that joked about the foolishness of getting married and how stupid women are. That's not me. I never was like that. I wanted to have a loving, great relationship, respectful and all that. And I was horrified by what started happening. So, to think that in these later years in life, when you're, getting a little older and you can't think as fast and you're still experiencing all these kind of unknown things, it's absolutely true that I never know when the boogeyman is around the corner. And I've had to make the decision and accept the fact that I am never completely in a normal relationship. I can't let down my guard. I still have to watch out for the boogeyman in our relationship, that it never is gone.
Yeah. And that lines up very well with this representation, this kind of what I occasionally call hierography. I mean, why in this form, in this shape, in this vision, in this experience? The question would be what to do about it. So your brain's processing this idea that you can't relax because you're always on the cusp of another disaster. I would probably say see a professional, because they're going to have the ability to give better advice. But the broad strokes of the idea is to then start looking at ways to safeguard or anticipate.
Yeah.
So there's two sides to it. One is the meditative, what am I trying to say, acceptance side. Just become okay with the fact that things go to shit sometimes, and there's really nothing you can do, and that's okay. And try not to let it ruin your good times. If you spend all the good times focusing on how everything could possibly go wrong, you're not having good times at all. You're just obsessing about the negative during the good times. So that's one side of it. And usually that works in combination with, okay, but let's look at practical things you can do to anticipate disaster, because as I said for decades now, at least two decades, fear, anxiety, pain, these are the worst things in life, which makes them your best friends. They let you know when something's wrong. Anxiety and fear direct your attention to a problem. This could go very badly in a way that is destructive of your happiness, destructive of your physical health. And, pain, of course, says, hey, maybe don't step on that. Maybe don't run. Your ankle is broken. it will be further broken if you run on it. So maybe pain keeps you from running on a broken ankle.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and when there's stories of these children that are born no pain receptors, and when they become toddlers, they will gouge their own eye out because they can't feel it. They will run on a broken leg until the bone is sticking out through the skin because they can't feel pain, and they're just happy-go-lucky little kids. Yeah, extremely rare, but it just serves to highlight how important it is that these intensely negative experiences are there for a reason. They didn't just, they're not there to torture us. They're there to keep us alive as much as possible.
Right.
So that's I try to look at it as, okay, well, what is this? What is your friend trying to tell you here? What is your anxiety directing your mind to?
Right.
So the broad strokes would be looking at ways to mindfulness, be present in your happiness, and set those fears aside and just enjoy the moment and say, hey, this is great. I got sunshine. I got a margarita, whatever you got going on. I'm listening to Jimmy Buffett. I don't know why I've got that in my head today, but yeah, right.
No, I like that. I think that is really important. I do believe in mindfulness. I do believe in finding joy in the moment. You really have to let yourself feel it and savor it more than we typically do. And that's a great arming ourselves, filling ourselves, satisfying ourselves so that when the boogeyman comes around, we're like, you know what? Okay. It's not that often. Life is really good in many ways, because honestly, our life probably has less stress and fewer problems than many, many marriages at this point. We really have a good relationship now, can communicate really well. But somewhere, I think also it's a good advice I probably should see my therapist and talk about this again. I believe in the power of therapy. I've been helped so much, and I have a new gentleman he'd probably appreciate talking this over with me as well.
Yeah. And then there could be some practical application of, let's try and get down into what areas you think actually might be on shaky ground realistically. Are there things you're not maybe addressing because it's too difficult, or in the sense that you don't know what to do about it yet, or you're hesitant to broach it because maybe you're afraid it's going to start a new argument with your wife, hypothetically,
very true. Not hypothetical. I am frequently afraid to engage in important conversation.
Yeah, I was just no. I just wanted to be hesitant about that because I'm not pointing fingers, but I understand that is exactly that's a thing. And it can be hard to say. How many caveats do you put? I love you. I'm not mad at you. I'm not leaving you. I just want to talk about this thing that I'm not happy about. It's very small, but if we could just, not explode over, you left the dirty dishes on the floor in the living room, and I slipped on them, and I'm kind of hurt. Can you put them away next time? Whatever it is.
You do that very well.
Thank you. I may have had experience, but no, yeah, and definitely bringing that to professional settings. Like we're just two people talking about dreams. I always tell folks I cannot ethically, in my estimation, give advice. Try and give people perspective. Point them in a useful direction maybe, but when it comes down to, this is your real life, real people, real relationships, you're not going to get the best possible resolution out of me in a half an hour, 45-minute, hour-long conversation. So really, dude, this is not counseling and therapy in the strictest sense. Sure. That's why I don't charge money. We can't be doing that.
No, but I think it's a great insight. I really do. I'm glad we talked about this because, A, my wife would like me not to kick her.
Yes.
And B,
that's a great
clearly something going on.
I would like to stop kicking you. I think I may have found a way. Can we talk about this thing? That's not bad.
That's funny. That's good. That's good. Hey, can I tell you about my wife's dream?
Oh, sure, please.
Just for fun. I told you I had this distinct sense that I recognized my wife. It was powerful. Well, she had a dream 10, 20 years after that she and I were sitting up on this little shelf, like if you remember the old TV show Bewitched, where they were all, wizards and witches and things in a fun way. And sometimes when her family members would come to visit, they would sit up on some shelf. and they would kind of like be engaging and talking with her. She said, well, that's kind of what it was like. We were sitting up on a shelf in this room, and we were watching your mother, meaning she was saying my mother was giving birth to my older sister. So I wasn't born yet. It was,
Wow.
she was watching my mother give birth to her, to her daughter, my older sister, if I said that right.
I think so.
And what was weird was that my mother was asleep. Now, that's not typical during childbirth.
Not so much.
No, very, very strange. Well, she didn't say anything. And then some years later, my mom was describing, for some reason, giving birth to my sister. And they said that something happened and they had to put me out. And so my mom was, in fact, asleep when my sister was born. Ooh. And my wife goes, seriously? I mean, let me tell you about this dream. And so, we've always believed that, we existed before we actually were born into this life. And I had this sense that I recognized her. She had this, which seemed to be a verifiable evidence to her, that she literally has this recollection of watching with me, watching my older sister be born. That's some pretty wild stuff.
That is. And this goes with my, so before we started talking, I said, I lean towards the agnostic atheism. I don't know what to believe necessarily, so I don't invest in any specific belief system. That goes with this psychic phenomena stuff. Where does that come from? I've literally a real life friend that I know lives, half a mile that way. And he has said, told me directly, Ben, I've had prophetic dreams. I had a dream where this was going to happen in this circumstance. And a couple days later, exactly like the dream. I don't know what to make of that. What I do is I don't discount it, but I also don't invest belief in it, from the sense that I can't explain to you how it works. I couldn't tell you how or when it might be predictable, how to tell the difference between it's just a dream and it's a prophetic dream. I stay out of all that kind of stuff where I'm trying to give advice on things I don't understand. Right. I can't deny that it happens, and or that people tell me it happens, and I'm going to assume most of them are being honest. They had this experience. That was leading me somewhere. Oh, the idea of, I've had this idea myself too. So agnostic, atheist and whatnot, but I've always kind of had the feeling that, and the belief, if we look at like the laws of thermodynamics, you can't destroy energy. And if our soul is a form of energy, it can neither be created nor destroyed. It is simply eternal, which is kind of the theory we're going with in the biblical sense. Right. And that means, we were around before. And in my more honest moments in terms of my struggles, and that I've created a lot of them myself in many different ways, mistakes and misunderstandings. I remember back to when I first had the epiphany. I was probably around before I was able to look at this entire life I was going to live, and I said, I choose to be born. I'm going to go have that experience for whatever reason. Yeah. And so I say, ultimately, it is all my fault. Fuck. From the very beginning, I chose to be born. Why did I do that? But then again, I'm not eager to leave. I could, let's just see what happens tomorrow. This is where I'm at usually. So.
How fascinating. That's neat. That's
so really that fits within my cosmology, my understanding of metaphysics and my open mind. I call myself a credulous skeptic. I'm willing to believe anything. There's nothing outside the realm of possibility, but my bar for proof is pretty high. My bar for advocacy of a particular perspective is pretty high. So that's where I'm coming from. I've rambled enough. I understand.
Very interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting. And to have that specific type of detail, to be able to tell you that your own mother was unconscious during a pregnancy before you were born. I mean, there's no way. Right. This is no way. Where would that even come from? How is that even possible?
Yeah, she witnessed it and she had no idea. Yeah. Yeah. It is fascinating.
I can't explain it, but it is fascinating. Yeah. Hopefully I'm going to get into more of those types of books. Lately I've been doing a lot of stuff from the pop culture, dream books side of things, a dream dictionary side, but then also getting into the kind of, there's the spiritual perspective as it transformed into a more medical, psychological perspective over the kind of between the 17, 18, 1900s is where it kind of, that rationalist enlightenment period. But I'm definitely starting to look for more books that get into more of the psychic phenomena side of things, and try and explore that a little bit better. ESP, parapsychological. I'm currently working on book 15. A little teaser for folks out there. It is a doctoral thesis from a guy who was talking about dreams as they are represented in Homer and Greek tragedy, because that was really where it started. Then I want to get into some of that other stuff of where did all these ideas of dream symbology come from in the Greek and Roman era and before that. Anyway, these are all, but I'm boring you with my book details. You have books, and we're running up against the clock again. This stupid thing's going to shut down if we don't wrap it up at some point. Do you feel you got a good exploration of the dreams you brought to share?
I do.
I don't want to cut you off.
This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm ready to. I'd love to just share a little bit more about the two books that I've written, because
yes,
the first book. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said yes. That's exactly where we're coming back around to. I want to make sure to plug your books, not just my own.
Well, the first book about Jesus, the subtitle is "The Story of Jesus and How It Applies to Us in the Twitter Era." It's specifically written for modern readers that have less time, often less interest in longer, complex books, want something that's quick and easy to read. It's chunked. I'm a professional instructional designer. I develop learning materials for a living, and I spent 20 years on this book trying to make his life understandable and very respectful towards skeptics. It's not like a Bible, beating, kind of a hellfire kind of book at all. I think people will be fascinated as they read the whole story from his birth to his death and resurrection, like a movie, like a guided tour with a lot of explanations of why it all matters today. It's got great reviews. It's actually become a popular book with approaching 250 ratings on Amazon. It was 3 times the #1 bestseller. So really excited.
And
then the newest
240 character chapters.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. I was holding on to that one. Go ahead.
Yeah, about 10 minutes per chapter with some nice illustrations. It's a good daily, 3 weeks, 1 chapter a day. You're done. You learn the whole life of Jesus.
Very cool. Yeah.
And the marriage book is our newest book. It's jointly authored. I already talked about it quite a bit, but I will mention that the most unique thing about it, that the PhD psychologists who reviewed it and have strongly supported that it's a high quality book. They said that getting the wife's perspective, so the spouse's perspective, from her mentally ill reference was so interesting, because it really juxtaposes what the so-called healthy spouse experiences with the frame of reference of this very disturbed individual. And it's all captured in these little half-page, one-page sections, like every chapter has one. And it's so eye-opening in terms of no wonder these marriages are so stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And then she writes that down, and then right afterwards she says, well, now that I've had better treatment and medications, here's how I look at it. And you can see from those descriptions that it's not all gone away. But we believe that these books, and of course the marriage book is for Christian readers. The only bad reviews that the book has gotten is from folks who didn't realize it was a Christian book, and they were disappointed. So they gave it 1 star because they said they didn't realize it was Christian. Well, that wasn't really very fair. But it is best for people of faith, because it'll resonate a little better.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wouldn't ever do is discount someone's story because their frame of reference is from a specific theological interpretation of the world and how it works. Their story is their story. This is what they went through, and this is how they used what they believe and how they look at the world to solve their problems. I think that's fantastic too. This isn't just you writing a book about your messed up relationship about your wife. It's with her input. You are in this marriage together. Marriage is 2 people become one in the classic sense. And there is no story in isolation. There is no your version is the version. It is, here's what we both saw and experienced. I think more relationship books need to be written from that perspective of like, here's 2 people, we both understood there was a problem. We were both working on it. Here's how I approached it and my partner approached it. And here's what we were able to negotiate together as a positive resolution. This is it's like a little roadmap for how someone else can do exactly the same thing, and not just from a one-sided view. That's powerful, I think.
Yeah, it is. And that is the feedback we've gotten. And the critic reviews have been very strong. It's a very special book. It has an important place today for people. And I think you described it well. We have accomplished that in that book. So we're grateful that it's out there, and some people have reached out to us and said, wow, this really, our life is so much like what yours was, and the recommendations are good. So, but at any rate, I really appreciated this conversation. I had no idea where it was going to go, right? But it's been really neat. Your energy, your passion for this topic are so fun, man. I had a great time.
I've never regretted talking to a single one of my interviewees too, and I always like pleasantly surprising them. We're going to get cut off by Zoom again, so I want to make sure we get the housekeeping in there. This has been our Christian Bohlen, Bohlen. Links in the description below. His website is hislifeandmine.com. And that is going to be a link to, well, it's multiple stuff there, but one book, Jesus Christ, His Life and Mine, also Healing the Stormy Marriage, and my housekeeping. Hey, please stop what you're doing, like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. 13 books of my own historical dream literature. Get a coffee mug, t-shirt, direct donations, buy me some whiskey for my game streams, and that's the housekeeping. Christian, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Benjamin. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Yep. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.